All right. So thank you so much for coming. This is nearing the end of my 5th year at Oregon State, and tonight is kind of the culmination of all the effort I've spent while here pursuing a degree in painting. I've made art since childhood and only started taking it really seriously at OSU. So what I've done here is gone through a lot of changes, and I've gone through a lot of changes as well. Catharsis, put simply, has been a focused effort of my using painting as a form of relief. I spent a lot of my life thinking of art and art making as a potential source of stress, something that I would do for assignments rather than for pleasure, besides in the few sketchbooks I would fill at home. However, as I spent more time in the fine arts department here at OSU, I was finding that this mentality was obstructing me from improving and loving art. Catharsis has been kind of a permission slip, permission to experiment and paint impulsively, all in the hopes of finding relief and release. The real physical start for Catharsis was in the spring of 2019. I had just entered upper division painting, and I had no idea what I wanted to paint for an entire term. And for those of you who don't know too much about our program, upper division painting is where we create a proposal and we decide what we want to paint, and start developing a cohesive portfolio that we've determined. The only idea that I felt that would be consistent were dream paintings, and dreams were useful because I dream every night, so I wouldn't run out of ideas. That in paint, dreams are strange and nonsensical while also maintaining truth or even at points clarity. They're a form of processing our experiences while also being representational of our unfiltered thoughts. Over time, I started getting comfortable with painting without pen or pencil, but I was struggling with making what I felt were finished pieces. I was encouraged by both Julie Green and Shelley Jordan to make smaller watercolor studies, and they really took off. I was able to develop these ideas really quickly through watercolor, creating stacks of these smaller 9x9 to 11x11 paintings. I started figuring out what was more interesting to me and what other people were interested in while looking at my work. I realized during making these that one of my strengths in watercolor was making ambiguous work that was still interesting. These paintings always get different responses, and people would try guessing what they were while remaining interested. But I wanted to start getting bigger and making larger, more finished pieces, which leads me to Catharsis specifically. So I started to make larger pieces. I knew that I had to be really engaged in the material in order to remain interested in larger works as well. Catharsis started at the beginning of this academic year in fall, right in the middle of the pandemic, and I really needed an outlet for processing all the feelings and issues I was having at that time. When I started looking at painting specifically as a form of relief rather than a set of assignments, they started to change. They became more personal, more interesting, and more enjoyable to paint. These are examples of internal reflections rather than dreams specifically. Be Gentle with the Slugs in Your Stomach was one of the first paintings I made in this series, when I was starting to come to terms with spending my final year at OSU remotely. I tend to hold my anxiety and stress in my stomach, and one day while out on a walk, I noticed these clumps of slugs sitting out in the grass, and I impulsively compared them to the feelings that I was holding in my stomach, and it resulted in this painting. So during the start of this year and during the start of making Be Gentle with the Slugs in Your Stomach, in class, you watched this interview with the painter Liu Xiaodong, and his ideology just helped Catharsis click into place. I gave myself permission to use painting as a form of relief, worrying less about how people would respond to them. And not surprisingly, people started to respond well. They were personal, and that attracts people, including myself. I have always preferred personal art and literature as it feels more authentic and relays more of a connection with its creator. So my paintings kept getting larger. I was painting with a lot stronger color and contrast, just relating to myself more than anything. These are two more of those internal reflections like the last set, where I sat with my feelings and used painting to figure them out. I feel that their size contributes to that impact, making them a lot closer to being life-sized and almost invasive. I'd Rather Break Than Bend was another stress painting, while Senioritis was in response to my incoming graduation and how I feel like I'm slowing down in the stresses of starting this next stage of my life. In terms of catharsis, making these paintings has been such a relief and such a stress reducer. As Xiaodong said, the world feels calmer and more still afterwards. Internally, I was starting to feel less jumbled and more put together, so these paintings were functioning the way I was hoping they would throughout the series. In relation to dreams and processing my experiences, my recent reading of Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy has really helped with my interpreting and my consideration towards catharsis. Art, in my case, makes difficult things softer and more manageable. And since I make art that makes me feel better, maybe it'll make others feel better too. So this is the first of my dream paintings that I'm presenting. The unfiltered state of our minds is so interesting and is honest in often strange ways. And I wanted to be able to work with that material alongside those internal reflections. This painting is a mix of a dream and a reflection, kind of bridging the two. I had drawn this kind of monster for a writer friend of mine, thank you, Maddie, and it must have stuck around in my head somewhere as I ended up having this strange dream about it. This painting has been really useful to me as I've started thinking about the landscape of the mind and the things that dwell there, things that are us, but also not us in consideration of how we interpret what's happening internally. These two are reinterpretations of dreams that I had in my childhood. They kind of stuck with me over the years, and I think there's value in revisiting them so long afterwards. I get to think them through as a past version of myself as well as my current self, which changes what they originally were while making them more relevant to who I am now. Guts was a dream from high school and was a revisit of my first dream painting, this painting actually. In this dream, every time I got upset or moved too quickly, I would throw up every one of my organs and have to swallow them back one by one. I remember really feeling something in my throat during the dream and after I woke up. And so it had this really visceral and strange like leftover in my mind as I left it. Waiting is a dream from my childhood. In the dream, as an elementary student, there was this enormous forest in the middle of our school. Every time we passed by it, I noticed this strange lumbering figure getting closer and closer. None of the teachers and most of the students didn't believe me that there was this figure in the woods. And finally, when it was much closer, I and the few who did believe me ran into this classroom and hid. I got into this sort of toy chest, and while listening to the heavy footsteps get closer from the bottom of the lid, I was able to watch the doorknobs turn slowly and click right as I woke up. I watched a lot of television and movies growing up, so many of my dreams are cinematic or have cinematic qualities. That dream was so dramatic, and it was also one of my first recalled nightmares, really making it a terrifying experience, but also at the same time very absurd in the traumatization of like the close-up on the doorknob that I was watching at that time. I wanted to include another recent dream before taking a pause in catharsis, and I felt that this piece fits really well because of how confusing and strange it is. Even I'm not really too sure about it too. I had this dream a few weeks ago and was only able to remember a few details about it. Those details were that I had way too many teeth and a man with a scarab for a face was trying to get into my mouth. I'm not really sure of its potential significance in interpreting my life at the moment, but I might have more answers on that in the future. It might mean that I have problems with dentists though, but we will see about that. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation and coming today. If anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them.
Who do you think is your biggest influence in your artwork?
I think that's such a hard question to answer because there is no one big thing. It's so many little things. The first person who comes to mind might be Kay Donachie, or I think Dusty Ray is the name of another painter that creates these surreal dreamlike paintings. Genres though, surrealism and Dada are so interesting, and I think that those are really relevant in making dream paintings. So in more of a general sense, those two genres would be more relevant.
Alex, can you unshare the screen?
Yes, thank you.
If you have any more questions, you can either put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. Alex, I just want to say how wonderful it is to see that whole body of work and the progression from those early dream paintings. These seem so much more informed about the direction that you're going, and you have the language to speak about them so eloquently and articulately. Can you just share with everybody where you're making your paintings? Because I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So I was really privileged at the beginning of quarantine to work with my father in finding a trailer and converting it into like a shed, not a shed, sorry, like a studio in my own room, because I'm living with my partner and his family right now. And so I'm just gonna flip my camera really quick. I kind of cleaned before the before today, so that's good. And I have like a really large board that I used to paint, but I've got a lot of cabinets and spaces to hang stuff. This is not the best viewing, my apologies, but yeah, this is where I've been making art for the last year and a half or so.
And
Yeah, I got my stuffed animals.
will you be able, Alex, to take that trailer with you wherever you go next? Your studio on wheels?
We need to fix a few things up first, but hopefully, yes.
That's great. It's terrific. Any other questions?
Alex, is there a reason for I've seen you use like specific color palettes together a lot. Have you noticed that change as you develop your work, or if you're going for a certain mood, do you pick a certain one?
I think it's impulsive, which the problem with that is I end up using primary colors. I'm not sure why, but red, yellow, and blue just have this really this strange effect depending on the transparencies in the paint. And so with that, if I don't think about what I'm doing, I just reach for those. I've been trying to branch out and use different colors. That last painting I showed with the scarab man face thing, I forced myself, I put down a wash of colors I'd never used, and it was so annoying and it was difficult, but I think I'm just attracted to red, yellow, and blue for a reason I'm not too sure. Mostly red because I paint a lot of body parts and whatnot. But that's a great question because I really am trying to branch out and use more color in my work. But I'm kind of too impulsive with no planning to what I'm painting.
Alex, can you talk about the imagery of the recurring imagery of teeth? So you talked about it in one painting where you had lots of teeth, but I noticed a lot of teeth in those paintings.
Yes. So generally looking through my work, I've noticed I paint a lot of teeth, eyes, and hands, usually with really obvious fingernails. And I think oh, so my current interpretation of that, because I'm painting things without thinking about it and then looking at it later, so it could just be kind of me making stuff up afterwards, but that's, the fun part of being an artist. I can do that if I want, is that those are things like teeth and hands are things that can cause pain, but they're also things that are sources of pleasure, while eyes are things that we view through eyes. And so that's how we interpret through our eyes, often just through the visual. And they're also sources of vulnerability. And so there's I think a lot of it is vulnerability and this like mix of vulnerability and power within those three things. Also, I never liked going to the dentist. It's such a vulnerable position to be in, like someone's in your mouth and you're expected to sit quietly. And what is really a surreal setting, like the pristine, clean dentist office, lying back, like not being able to really protect yourself. I always hold my hands, I grip my hands into like the armrests. It's very uncomfortable, the process of getting braces and that whole thing was just, it really stuck in my mind. So I think there's definitely some of the discomfort about subjecting ourselves to those experiences supposedly for our own health, but also just like because it's supposed to be good for us, but it's also very painful.
Thank you. There's a question from Lacey and Lennox. Do you plan your compositions ahead of time, or do you instinctually develop the image as you paint?
I usually do a mix of both. I tend to, usually I don't put a wash down first, like of a heavy color. I will just go from general to specific, meaning I put down a layer of really thin, watered down paint and kind of the shape that's in my head. So I start out with kind of an idea, but because I don't plan the composition, things are usually too big or too small and I have to work with it. And so what starts out as an idea very quickly undergoes the process of change. And And I think that I love that part of it. Like, be gentle with the slugs in your stomach went through so many changes. It was supposed to be life size, but parts of it ended up being too big. Parts of it were too small. The colors changed through it. And so a lot of it's impulsively making changes upon what was an original idea that was just really vague or ambiguous.
Learn anything from Shelley today? Anything interesting? What did you guys talk about? She stayed a long time. Still on campus.
So Julie, I think you're unmuted, unless you have a question. Thank you for joining us, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
It's covered and
Even the roosters are greeting. Do we have other questions? So it sounds like you start with your idea.
Because you didn't know the pandemic in 1918 had started with Kansas.
And I lost you.
It was,
it's finished.
and,
Julie, can you hear me? Julie? Oh, well.
State University.
Anyway, so you start with your general idea, but then you
Shelley,
allow
Julie for just now.
okay.
David did.
Oh, really?
Okay, I was able to.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
Oh, good work. Not often you can mute a teacher, right? So you start off with an idea and then but then you have a dialogue with the painting once you start. And that is what's interesting because you don't really know what the outcome is. And I think that engagement with the paint itself and having to respond to that actually creates a much more interesting outcome because it's unexpected and you're letting the painting direct as much as you're directing, as I understand it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it doesn't stop after it's finished. As I'm writing about my work or as I'm just thinking about it, my opinions change drastically. One of my least favorite works was Guts. I wanted to include it anyway because I enjoyed making it. And I've gotten that's one of the ones people have pointed out to me. People have looked at my show before this talk of being their favorite, being what they're really interested in. And I'm always surprised because in my mind, I was like, this painting is garbage, but people have been changing my mind about it. And other paintings, which I thought were really successful, have diminished in my mind as I keep looking at them and like losing that connection with them. It's like, I don't want to say they're like people, but it's like my relationship with these paintings do change over time, even once I've put down the brush.
That's a good way of articulating that. Lacey and Lennox are saying the work is so beautiful and ominous. Love hearing your process and how cathartic painting is for you. Yeah, and I think that especially in this very difficult year that we've all had, the creative outlet, not only the creative outlet for the artist, but also for the community has been so important. Any other questions? Well, a big applause for Alex. Alex, why don't you stay? So the official part of the presentation is over. Well done, Alex. And anybody that wants to stay on and just kind of chat with Alex is welcome to. I'm going to leave, but you can end at any time. So thank you all for coming and kudos, Alex. Well done.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave. Bye-bye.
So Chris, in response to your question, I'm probably going to eat some ice cream. So immediately just that. In the future, I'm going to continue Catharsis. I don't feel like it's finished in terms of being my senior show. It's finished, but I feel like this is a series that's going to continue on for quite some time. Though I am really interested in continuing my writing and working on potential graphic novels that are pretty different from what I'm making through watercolor. But I'm really interested in continuing that over the summer and starting that up with a lot more attention. But just more watercolor paintings, probably some oil paintings, trying to get that more into the mix as well. So I haven't seen too much of the chat. I'm just going to check it really quick so I'm not just ignoring anyone on accident. Thank you all for your comments. Does anyone else have any questions, or you also feel free to just speak if you'd like to as well.
Do any of your dreams like reoccur after you've painted them, and are they different afterwards, or?
I've only had a few recurring dreams in my life that happened throughout childhood, and they're just really cinematic, like little mini movies. Other than that, no, I very rarely have recurring dreams, and nothing that I've painted has recurring dreams except for the one for purging, which is I'm not really sure why that one showed up. Maybe just because it was such a strange creature. Thank you, Isaiah.
Where did you lose your first tooth?
Well, we have different stories about this. I lost my first 2 teeth in one night. The first, I was brushing my teeth and it fell out and went down the drain. But I didn't notice until I walked out and smiled at my parents. And I forget which one went, Alex, where's your tooth? And one of them had to dig into the drain to get one. And then I told my father that one of my other teeth were loose. And he was like, let me look. And then he just pulled it out without asking me. My third tooth, I lost at Disneyland Paris in the Pinocchio bar. That one is very specific. And I was crying about it a lot.
That's not the first one I remember you losing.
Well, I very strongly disagree, but we can go ahead.
I got pictures of it. You lost your first one in the front of the Colosseum in Rome.
Really? I don't remember that one. Well, it doesn't
got
count because I don't
pictures
remember
of
it,
it.
so.
Yeah, I got pictures of it with the bloody tooth coming out, and there's a Colosseum behind. It's like, how many people can actually say that they lost a bloody tooth? And that's all I know is I see all these teeth on your picture.
Definitely consider painting a bloody Coliseum now, so sounds fun.
Hey Alex, it's Lennox. I just want to say congratulations. That was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much for explaining
Thank you.
to such an in-depth degree. It was lovely.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch it develop. This is Lacey too. Thank you for sharing with us. I love seeing your work, and it was really cool to see the scale when you had it up in the shed. I love that.
It's so different with the pandemic. Like, I know fall term, I wasn't really telling anyone how big it was because I wasn't thinking about it until like I realized that the size is really important, and people were really surprised by how large they were getting. Because when we're doing our portfolio reviews and whatnot online, you can't tell. Some things could be 4 inches, some things can be 4 feet, and it's so much easier in the shed to tell that there's a lot of space happening and a lot of space that's being used up. Glad you guys are able to make it. Thank you. Also, everyone feel free to leave whenever you need to. No worries about staying until the very end. I'm just gonna hang out until, I don't know.
What's the biggest painting you're thinking of doing? At what point would you stop and say this is too much?
I don't think there is a point where I would stop here. I actually just realized I was gonna unmute someone just in case. Oh, never mind. Okay. Sorry. Well, purging was the biggest one. That one was huge to work on. It was kind of stressful because it was just giant and I used so much paint and I had to keep mixing paint for it. But I think the only limit is the access to paper I have. Like, the limit for these ones was how big the roll of paper was and how big the board I had to paint on was. I would love to work really large, but with watercolor being my primary medium, it can be frustrating to work with really large pieces of paper. Rolling them up and storing them is a giant pain. But if I could get a giant piece of paper that was maybe double the size of a roll, that would really be fun. I think I would enjoy it.
How would you describe your journey from when you started college, like your artistic journey, from when you started college to where you are now?
I had to go through a transition in how I viewed art and art making, mostly. I think at first I fell into the whole, it's school, so it's work, which is such a detrimental mindset to have when being an artist. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to continue and to make better art and to meet other artists. And so for the first few years, I was like, it's an assignment. I'm going to finish it and then go home. Or mindsets like that, which, you know, it was really problematic. And only when I started going to painting 3 and having more control over what I could paint and realizing that it was an opportunity, that I start really focusing on using the opportunity and really like painting, using time inside and outside of class to make art is really important. Like, I'm going to be an artist. Why am I not using this time more just why am I not using my time better? And it made a huge difference, and my art improved so much more in those 2 years that I switched that mindset too. So I think for other artists, it's just any opportunity to make art is an opportunity. It shouldn't be an assignment, or it shouldn't be a drag, because then it's not going to be good art, or it might not be good art. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you for coming. Can't wait for that ice cream. It's gonna be great. I'm just gonna, oh, it's okay. Sorry, I'm getting like a message, like a private message at the same time. Did not mean to. All right. And if anyone is having trouble like unmuting, feel free to go into the chat. This is so weird because in person it's just like, it's like a party. It's like we have snacks and we just look at the art and we chat and then we go home. But with this, it's like an undetermined cutoff point. And it is recorded, so I guess if anyone wants one of the recordings, let me know. I'm not sure how interesting that'll be, but hey, Julie, I don't know if we cut you off earlier. Are you able to unmute? No worries if not. I feel weird, like potentially ending the Zoom session when one of my professors is here, because I'm like, oh no, am I going to cut them off? So I'm like, I guess I'm just going to hang out until something happens, maybe. Which is fun. Oh man. Thanks for hanging out, you guys.
What kind of art do you think you'll make like later on in your life? Like if you could see or predict what kind of art you're going to make in the future, what do you think it would look like?
I have no idea. I'm so bad at predicting what I'll do because I always ignore those predictions and do the opposite or just something drastically different. I just hope that I continue making art. I mean, I do see myself doing digital work with making comics because I'm really interested in that, as well as with painting, oil and watercolor generally. I hope I do more oil in terms of medium. I think that there's a lot of opportunities. I'm really frustrated with oil generally, but that's just because I'm an impatient person and it's messy and I have to clean it up afterwards. With watercolor, I don't really need to. Yeah, great question. I think, okay, so Julie hasn't said anything and that's totally fine. I think I'm going to go ahead, and unless anyone has any last second things, I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation, but feel free to email me or send me a message if you have anything else or want the copy of the recording or anything. Thank you guys so much for coming. Wave, hi. Thank you guys. This is great.